This is Patrick Durkin with the Wellness Enterprise, and I received a wonderful phone call recently from Joanna Mendez. And Joanne has an amazing story around her health and her career with regard to health and a passion for structured water. And so I asked her if she'd be interested in sharing that story with the world, and she said yes. So here we are today. Joanne's on the line with me, and we're going to have an amazing discussion about health and water. So, Joanne, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, I just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in South Florida, in Miami, and I had a lot of lessons from my grandmother growing up, and one of those lessons reflected on water, and her first teaching was how precious water actually is, and also never to take it for granted. And this is back in the early 60s. She told me one day we would be buying water, and I said, well, that's crazy. We can get it out of the sink. Why would anyone pay for water? And she would bring the pot, the kettle that we would use to boil our water, and she said, see all this caking? That's in our body, and that's not a healthy water. Water that comes naturally from the ground is spring water, and that's a much alive, vibrant water. And she would actually, when the teachings, when we would go into a spring, she would demonstrate how alive the water was. And you, when you started noticing that as a child, you noticed when you were in spring water or when you were in, basically tap water that was chlorinated or fluoridated. And so we ended up moving when I was in 6th grade. And the house we moved into actually had a well. And you could absolutely taste the difference between what we had before and that precious well water. And then so as time went on, I think what happens is we start taking things for granted, and we start taking water for granted until we start noticing that, the water is not the same as what it used to be. And the shift is so gradual that I don't think most people even notice it. And then you start drinking from bottled water, that's sitting on the shelf, or even plastic water. The plastic water bottles, we now can measure the phthalates that are inside our body. Most people I see, I'm a nurse practitioner. I was trained at University of Miami. I graduated in '76. I was a coronary care nurse. Basically did that for a year and a half and went back to school to become a nurse practitioner. And so I've been an observer. I think as healthcare providers, we're facilitators. We can always facilitate someone who's willing to change or wants information, but those who aren't, we can't help. But as a facilitator, you basically are able to open people up to a path of healing, but only if they're ready to heal. And I would say the number one problem in healthcare today is ignorance. I will say that, unfortunately, most people don't realize what they don't know. And the second problem with healthcare today is dehydration. Some people put dehydration first. I put it second because if you don't even realize what you don't know, then that's a huge part of the learning process to getting well. And so when you ask clients to come to see you how much water they're drinking, you realize what a crisis that they are already in. And so, I would say 80% of my clients are very receptive to increasing their hydration. I encourage people, and I think many wellness doctors agree with this, is you take your weight and you divide that by 2, and that's the amount of ounces that you should drink in water. And water counts as water. You can't drink Gatorade and Powerade and sodas and tea and all these other things and think you're hydrating your body because you're not. So water is a critical part of getting their health back.
Joanne,
and then the next step
Joanne, let me slow you down there for a second. First off, I just want to have a shout out to your grandmother for her observations about the simplicity of what really matters in life. That's pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
it's amazing that you had the privilege of being guided that way, so that you grew up observing things. It's pretty amazing.
And one other mention about my grandmother. This was a lesson that I probably had when I was 8 or 9 years old. I was ironing on the couch. My mother was busy cooking, and I have this terrible burn. The burn is second or third degree. There was some black area, severe blistering, and my mother rushes me to the family doctor, who was Dr. McElhaney, and Dr. McElhaney was a great doctor. He basically looked at it and he goes, "This is going to need grafting." He said he put zinc oxide on it, wrapped it up, and basically told me I'd see him in a week. And I get home, and we live in a duplex, and my grandmother's on the other side of the duplex, and she goes, "Oh, wait a minute." He says it's going to need grafting, and so she unwraps the bandage, scrapes the zinc oxide on, which was terrible, but and then takes the aloe plant, slices the aloe plant, puts this goo on my hand, wraps it up, and says, "Now it will heal."
Yeah.
And she's holding my hand between her hand, and she goes, "This will heal without grafting." And so a week goes by, go back to Dr. McElhaney. Dr. McElhaney unwraps it, and he goes, "Oh, my gosh, this doesn't need grafting." And I said, "Well, to be perfectly honest with you, my grandmother scraped your medicine off and put aloe on." And this is the beauty of a good doctor. He says, "Your grandmother's a wise woman." Now, many of the physicians I know today would be livid that you took their medicine off. But that is the power of your intuition, you following your heart, knowing some of what your ancestors taught you. And yes, that was a powerful lesson at an early age where I realized, my grandmother took the doctor's medicine off, and she healed me better than he could. And so I really realized at that age that, doctors really don't have all the answers. And there are some great doctors out there.
Yeah. So I want to bring you back now. So the reason I jumped in is you were talking about the different beverages. And I think when people are early on in discovering the wisdom of what's already there for us, as your story with the aloe so aptly demonstrates, they look at a beverage like coffee or juice or something, and they think it's liquid. It must be water. It must hydrate. So, given your background as both an observer of nature and life and as a nurse practitioner, why aren't those beverages the same as living water?
Yeah. Well, I would say that you're adding a lot of toxic substances. I think some of them have actually fructose in them, or corn syrup, and you also have the high level of sugar, and I encourage my clients not to have more than 1 teaspoon of white sugar a day, and they're shocked at that statement. I encourage them not to eat bread. If they're going to eat bread, I would recommend, basically an Ezekiel, a sprouted grain, something that they could buy at the store. And if they wanted to make bread, make it with an ancient grain like einkorn or kamut, or make a sourdough bread that's easier to digest. So in all the years and the diabetics that I've treated, I could not maintain a diabetic's blood sugar if they continued on bread. So that was another powerful lesson. I've worked in a lot of settings. I've been fortunate in my path to really have an array of experiences. I've worked at the VA. I worked in cardiology, and I've worked with the intra-aortic balloon pump, and I worked with pacing and the implantable defibrillator. I worked in prisons. I've worked in nursing homes. I've worked in basically neighborhood clinics, and so I've worked with a lot of patients that they couldn't rub two nickels together. So we had to be creative, to bring their health back. And so there are things that fortunately are not expensive that really can bring someone's health back if they do simple things. And I've followed some great, fabulous teachers, and I encourage people to follow them. I've sent you a one page. It's Mom's 10 Steps. I prepared it for my daughter, but it's basically steps so that whatever I cover, they can go and do some research on that individual and really dig deep into it and learn a tremendous amount. So I can talk about a lot of those individuals. But I'm trying to stay on water right now, and so
so our audience is focused on water, and you have a lot of knowledge about structured water. And one of the things I've enjoyed about our early conversations is that you have more of a science-minded way of thinking than I do, and I appreciate that about you. So maybe you could share with people from your perspective what you've discovered about structured water and why you're so excited about it.
Yeah, so in my life's experience, there's a couple places that I've gone, and I noticed that the water was so different. And my favorite place in the world would be the Ichetucknee, which is about 2 hours from my house. It's near a place called High Springs. They focused it on National Geographic. And anyway, years ago, and people from all over the world have come to the Ichetucknee. It's 8 springs, and it's a beautiful flowing river. And when you are floating in the summertime in the Ichetucknee, your energy of your body is lifted. You are in a very peaceful, restful state at the end of those 4 hours, and it's a water that I think that anybody that wanted to really feel what structured water is, when you are in that body of structured water, you know it. And another place where I sensed that was my husband and I went to a beautiful resort. It's called Hidden Valley, and it was in Belize. And up through the granite on the top of this mountain, they had water. And that water is called primary water. And very few people know about primary water. But there are some dowsers that actually can find primary water. It's actually water that comes through the fissures, and it is, I believe, structured water. And it's a form of water not running out, because what happens here is it's coming from, as far as I understand, from the magma, from the center, and moving through the fissures of the earth and coming up. And so that water is vortexing and structuring, and whatever that stone is that it's coming up through, it's carrying that energy, that frequency of that stone. When we showered at Hidden Valley, both of us had the same experience. Our skin was like silk. The energy of the water, you didn't want to leave the energy of the water. We would take showers, and the person that owned this was Bull Headley, who was actually originally from Tallahassee. So it was we would tell Bull, I said, you should bottle this water. This is sacred water, and he agreed, and he wanted somebody to do that. And anyway, we were both in our careers, and it wasn't something that was on our plate, but we certainly appreciated it, and we did not want to leave the shower. We would take the longest showers of our lives. And then there was a place near there called Butterfly Falls, and it is tough to get to, and you all actually had to crawl on your hands and knees at some points. And when you got there, here's this, again, sacred water, and you'd get inside of it, and the color of it and the feeling of it was unreal. And so those are, I certainly have been blessed. And whenever I go to any vacation, I'm always looking for springs. I don't care if it's cold or hot. And recently we went to Costa Rica. We went to Costa Rica because I was struggling with not getting over this Hashimoto's, and I fortunately went to a workshop Dr. Jerry Tennant put on, and he basically told me, you're not going to get over it until you take care of your teeth. And I didn't have any symptoms with my teeth. My teeth were fine. I went to what I would call, good dentist. He said, well, get a 3D cone. Well, a 3D cone is an MRI, not an MRI. It's like actually like a CAT scan of your jaw, but it goes deeper than the teeth, and they're looking for ischemic bone. And when they find ischemic bone, they basically, that's a circuit breaker, and exactly where Dr. Tennant said I'd have ischemic bone, it was on the 15th tooth, that was the circuit breaker to the endocrine. And he said, and so sure enough, I had to take care of that issue. And if I had it done in this country, it would be, oh my gosh, I probably saved 70% by going to Costa Rica and seeing the same biological dentist that I would have seen here, except in Costa Rica, and getting the same results. But anyway, so I'm over there, and the water at the spring in Costa Rica is absolutely fabulous. It's it's structured. You can feel the energy of the water in the cold, and then you go from the cold to the hot. I mean, it was just another very sacred water. So I call it sacred, but it's really what many scientists would call structure. They call it EZ, and some people call it fourth phase. So now people are calling the water, in whatever term you want to call it, it is alive. It is energized. It is electrically charged. And, I love the work of Dr. Gerald Pollack. Dr. Gerald Pollack, basically can go in and in the water measure where the structured water is with a negative potential. And on the other side of the structured water is a positive potential. So it is electrically charged. The water has a life like a battery. Dr. Jerry Tennant talks about our bodies being a battery. And so when you start thinking about us as batteries, your teeth are circuit breakers. If the water is a battery, and you're basically energizing your body with good water. Now, there are ways of structuring your water without drinking structured water, but it's a lot better to store up your cells with structured water. And Dr. Jack Kruse talks about the near-infrared, and so does Dr. Alexander Runch. Dr. Jack Kruse is a neurosurgeon. He's excellent speaker. He talks about EMF, and he talks about structured water and how critical hydration is. So when we are not drinking structured water or not structuring our water inside our body, so you say, how do you structure your water inside your body? There's a couple of ways. You can actually get your feet on the ground, sit in the morning sunlight, and you will get that near-infrared light. And that near-infrared light will structure the water that are in the muscle, inside those cells. They will begin to structure. And another way of structuring water is through, and I'll go back, the near-infrared light is delivering a frequency that's causing that. So we're all going back to frequency, and the energy of that frequency is very healing. And so another form of structuring water is through whole tones. The whole tones is delivering a musical frequency to the body. So if I took a glass of water and I put it in front of the frequency of the solfeggio notes, these are ancient notes, you actually can see and measure the water becoming structured. With the products with Wellness Enterprise, the beauty of that is now you can take off all the labor, and you can actually easily put the water in the VitaJoule and it becomes structured. You can pour it down natural action it becomes structured. You can pass it through the Javara. Not only does it become structured, it has the minerals that are in that device. Same with the VitaJewel. Now, I took this to work recently. I put the 3 out there, and I challenged people. I took their bottled water, I put it in a cup, I put the natural action in a cup, and I put the Javara in a cup. Every one of them could tell the difference of which ones were structured and which was not structured. And I let everybody that was present, there were 6 people present, you can smell the difference, you can taste the difference, and it's the same thing as if I'm in the spring head. If I'm in a spring head and that water's gushing up and it's got that vitality, it's you can taste the difference. It's energized, and it has a better effect on the body. So I challenge people, I guess, to play with the water. Allow yourself to let the water show you, and you'll notice things in your body performing better. There's, going back to dehydration, if people are grossly dehydrated, I basically tell them, think of yourself as a plant. If a plant doesn't get 90% of the water it needs, it's struggling. And we are the same way. So we can't reverse disease if someone is going to stay in a state of dehydration. So that's a long answer, I know.
I love what you're sharing. Between the diversity of experiences you've had living, the natural observations that you've had, the science that you've studied, and the different ways that you're putting it into practice, it's phenomenal. It's really inspiring. You've lived, really fully and really openly, and so all of this is coming to focus around you. So let me see here what our listeners might be interested in also knowing from you. Do you have an opinion about whether what would you say to somebody whose only thinking until now has been, I either buy bottled water because I don't think any other type of water is safe, or I use a water filter, and that makes water safe for me? What would you say to that person?
Oh, I tell them to do an organic acid test, and then start looking at what basically is inside their body that doesn't belong there, and they will find phthalates. And if they're drinking out of styrene, they'll find styrene, and those are severe carcinogens. So, if they're truly interested in healing, they will start tasting the water that is different, and the water will speak for itself. It's not something, when I was at work and I had them tasting this water, they didn't want their bottled water anymore. They wanted to take their bottled water and put it through these devices. And so they were trying to figure out what's the best way to get involved with this. And so they're all looking at getting a VitaJewel, and that's their first step. And then they can travel anywhere with their VitaJewel, and they can be drinking structured water. And then their next step, I told them, is if money is of critical concern, then there's a combination that has the natural action portable unit and a shower head. Because you can't ignore the shower. If you're going to stand in the shower, you're going to absorb 100 times more than what you're drinking. And so that's an ideal first step. But that's what I would encourage anyone to do. Nice.
And
now,
okay, so
people
go ahead.
Some people are resistant. Some people are resistant because they don't want to think that they have to change a pattern. We're people of we get into a pattern. We don't want to change our patterns. Change is hard for some people.
Yeah.
But illness is worse. So when someone is being faced with hypertension, diabetes, a skin issue, and you're saying, okay, well, step one, number one is hydrate yourself with good water. Now that sounds a lot easier. And I don't know many families, unless you're a Western A. Price. Western A. Price, they've got a lot of healthy people. But most families have a tremendous crisis going on with health care. And our health care is sick care. And we've got a lot of dinosaurs out there called doctors that have no clue of the path to wellness. And I say that because I reach so many of them that are not at all open-minded. They do not want to change their old patterns. And there's a little bit of brainwashing in our medical schools and nurse practitioner schools. I'm not impressed with somebody that comes out of school and doesn't understand the first statement, first do no harm.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So, okay, so I gave you a two-part question, and you focused, I think, mostly on the bottled water part. So what about, I have no idea what your opinion of this is, so it's going to be interesting to hear, but what do you think about water filters, like a traditional filter, as a way of treating water compared to treating water by structuring it?
You know something, I do believe in the statement, if you don't filter your water, you become the filter. So if you have a Berkey water filter, at least you're filtering out a lot of things, and that's ideal. You're getting out the fluoride and you're getting out the chlorine, and that's sometimes someone's first step. I wouldn't tell somebody that an inferior filter that doesn't take out that stuff, it's still an inferior filter, but that filtered water is not structured water. It's better water. It's better. You're going in the right direction, and it's a step forward. And it's the same with the alkaline water. Yeah, it's great. You've alkalized the water, but you haven't structured it yet. And that structured water is going to outperform your plant growth, your seed growth, your cell vitality, your ability to absorb ATP and work with ATP. It strengthens the mitochondria, So I would say go ahead and filter your water. That's fine, but structure it. And then after you've structured your water, then tell me what you notice. Tell me what your body notices different.
Do you have any
you will notice something.
We've been so trained to turn to experts for our answers and not to be able to notice our bodies. Do you have any suggestions for somebody who feels like they don't have those kind of insights or discernment about how they might cultivate it or where they might look for the differences?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, put down your cell phone, get away from your computer, ground yourself, put your feet on the ground, and allow yourself to feel 10 minutes of morning sunlight or evening sunlight, whichever one you can get. I don't want rubber shoes on. I want your feet on the ground. And then just allow yourself to be, because it's, Einstein had a beautiful saying, and I've got to say that I do believe he was correct in this statement. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
Nice.
And not until we're at that still point do we honor that gift.
It's just a wonderful story that you shared, and I think it'll make a big difference for people, especially knowing where you're coming from. So thank you so much for talking with me today.
You're welcome.